observer in the game, and while you're streaming a replay or a cast, for example. And this is something just to help everybody improve in general. I think it's going to be really, really beneficial for the viewers especially, but also because the way that I do things is I minimize the mouse movements, which means I have to think less about where I'm moving my mouse and more about what I'm saying in a cast, which is really, really helpful and important in terms of making the cast feel a lot smoother and not as sort of rough and jaggedy. So I've already brought you guys to a point in the game in this one of my games I played this year where it's about muta harass, and muta harass usually has a lot of moving parts, right? Because Marines and mutas are moving all over the place. Mutas are diving in and out, and so it's sometimes quite hard to capture all of the action all the time. And in general, this is probably the easiest way to improve at observing is if you can follow a muta battle, you'll be fine, like with everything in general. But the number one tip that I try to give people is I want to see the people use the mouse less. I don't need to see the mouse going across the screen all the time like this because it's very distracting, right? If you're the viewer right now, you can already tell how distracting this mouse movement is, right? You're not focused really on what's going on in the game. You're focused more on the mouse, and you're probably thinking to yourself, man, I wish this mouse would stop moving as much. If you go back and watch any Kespa era, or in general any kind of Korean casting for professional tournaments, for example, like any ASL tournament, any old KSL tournament, the new Superstar League, you'll watch the observer of their mouse movements. They move their mouse very little. Most of the time, the mouse is either moving to click on a unit to look at upgrades, for example, or the mouse is moving on the minimap to click on certain locations that the observer might have a interest in, right? So that's what primarily the mouse should be for. The mouse should not be using to be scrolling, right? You have two ways of scrolling the screen around. One is mouse movement like this, which all of you can see is very distracting and annoying. The other one is using my keyboard. So I'm using the up, down, left, right on my keyboard right now. As you can see, it's much better. It's much smoother. I have it turned up all the way. So if I go to my settings here, my mouse scroll, actually my mouse scroll is right in the middle, but it could be higher, it could be lower. I like to keep it pretty high in terms of gameplay, so I usually don't change it. Mouse scroll, I leave it as normal. But in general, if you wanted to go with the slowest key scroll here, this would be like the smoothest, right? Probably the best. And in fact, I should probably just change it to that anyways. But obviously, if you move it to a more like moderate speed, it's a little harder to like kind of just tap on it because you're not going to be able to recenter the best using a higher key scroll. But regardless, figure out what suits you. Actually, key scroll lower is probably really, really good in this situation. I can feel it's a lot better and smoother. So that's number one, is avoid mouse scroll like this and use key scroll like this, because obviously, as you can see, the mouse isn't moving just the screen, which is great. That's number one, and that's probably the most important. Number two is, and this ties into the next point, when you're commentating fights that go on, you want to try to stay centered on the action. You don't, like, if, for example, right now, if I'm looking at the Marine ball here, I can see the mutas down here, but it's not great. You want everything to be centered, and you want to kind of predict where the fight is going to take place. So in this case, basically anywhere in between where the current Marines are and where the Mutalisks and the Zerglings are is a really good spot to be in. So right here, this is kind of where the center is going to be, or if the mutas attack the Marine ball, maybe you want to be biased a little bit towards the Marine ball, like here, where the center of my screen is now in this spot instead. So as I unload the fight, you can see me adjusting the camera, but I don't want to move it too much, right? I just want to make small adjustments. So you see in that entire sequence there, in that little 5 sequence, the mutas were darting in and out. I didn't move the screen, right? I moved it very minimally. I'm not taking big actions here or trying to, scroll the mouse while the fight's going on. I want to make sure that I stay centered. And if I need to adjust, I take small little steps here. Small little steps, because I don't need to move the screen. And that's what a lot of people do, is they like to move the screen around too much. So right now, all the fights happening on the screen, I'm not moving my screen whatsoever. We're watching the fight pan out. I could talk about how, the mutas are darting in, getting Marine kills, and the Marines are living, blah, blah, blah. Like, I could talk about that, and I don't need to move the screen. So that's really important right there, what just happened. So I go back. If I just go back a little bit here. Again, you want to predict where the fight's going to be. Now the mutas and links could have just ran away here, and that's fine. I don't have to move the screen. I would just simply move to the next step of casting, which is going to be, okay, what's my next upgrade, or what's the next point of view that I want to take a look at? What's the next point of interest that the viewers might want to have an idea of? So again, if I go here, I'm not doing anything. Look, I'm literally, my hands are off the keyboard and off the mouse right now. Like I'm just not doing anything, and it's great for the viewer because they can focus on what's happening on the screen rather than maybe what's happening on with the mouse or the screen moving. Obviously, at the very end there, I had to adjust, but as you can see, I made one adjustment during that entire fight. Obviously, it's something that you're gonna have to get practice with and have a better sense of where the fight is gonna take place. But in general, this is sort of what you should be doing with your mouse movements. Keep it really nice and simple. Another thing is you can is using hotkeys during the game. You can use A to kind of remove everything to give you and the viewer a bigger screen to play with. A is the hotkey. I'm hitting A right now. Q, W, E, and R are all the ones that give you all these panels. So Q is the minimap, W is the unit panel, E is the kind of statistics panel, and then R is the side panel here. The replay panel and the production panel are both, unfortunately, they don't have a single hotkey. You'd have to do Alt. For example, Alt-Y is the replay panel, so you'd have to disable that. But in general, you don't really need to touch these if you're a commentator. A is probably just going to be the best thing you can do, or just having R turned off is always a nice thing to get rid of. But in general, A is going to be your best friend. So for example, if the bigger fight's happening where you don't really need to see the money or the supply or anything, you can show the supply afterwards, which kind of lends a little bit of perspective for the viewer. That's all great too. So anyways, and the last thing is with the mouse movement again, we don't want to move around too much. We're like, oh, here's a hatchery, and you can see my mouse is moving all over the place. You want to really use the mini map and try to center on what your next point of interest is. So for example, let's say, oh, I see the +1 weapons finished. Okay, I go up here. I see that the eBay is started to armor upgrade. I can go to a Marine now. Let's find the Marine ball. Here's a Marine ball. Click on the Marine. Oh, look, there's the armor upgrade. But I don't need to spam my mouse everywhere, which distracts the viewer. I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to make sure that my movements are very crisp. When we see a new building being built, you want to click on that and just kind of highlight that, okay, this is the next point of interest. Okay, we got a Queen's Nest. We have a Hydra. He's probably researching Lurker upgrade. Or maybe not, because we don't even see it upgraded. Maybe he's already upgraded it. Who knows? And then again, when we go to a fight, we want to stay centered, minimal mouse movement. As you can see here, this was pretty good on my part. I got it pretty well centered there. Don't have to move anything. And then again, if the fight starts getting dragged out, you can always zoom out a little bit, which is always beneficial. Or if, okay, the fight's over, okay, we can zoom back in and we can just move back. Because zooming in is the biggest amount of clarity. You don't want to be zoomed out like this. Okay, I can't really see what's going on. So having finding a good medium between 2 zoomed out and 2 zoomed in is always going to be good. Obviously, with smaller balls like in TVZ, probably having a moderate level of zoom in, zoom out is really good. But in TVP, where you have maxed out Terran versus Porous armies, having a fight, zooming out pretty large like this is probably going to be more helpful. So those are just my general tips and advice. For the most part, if there's one big takeaway, it's just minimizing mouse movement and having the arrow keys as your best friend, and then clicking on the minimap rather than scrolling to place like this. Okay, so for example, oh, here's Hive. And then we see another fight coming in. Oh, the Marines are coming in here. Wow. Just try to minimize movement. We don't want to move the screen too often here. And that's pretty much the best way in terms of improving how you are going to be observing when you're casting. So I hope that helps a lot of people out. And, hopefully this will kind of teach you a little bit and guide you on how to do a little bit of better observing while you're doing casts. Thanks. Let me know if you have any questions. See ya.